some more words about how the ECDL Foundation is working on program development. Digital marketing is the latest module developed, but in general, as you have heard from Daniel's presentation, when they perceive a need across the world, a need of IT skills, emerging IT skills, Frank's team takes charge of developing or studying new syllabi on new modules. So,
thank you, Paolo. So firstly, I will apologize for not speaking in Italian. Secondly, I will apologize from keeping you from your lunch. So this is always a difficult slot, but I promise to keep it quite quick and brief. Paolo has already introduced me, and Dan has already done some of the work in terms of explaining who ECDL Foundation is and what we do. So really my objective is just to explain a little bit about our program development function and about how we bring ideas to reality in terms of certification programs, and importantly I want to talk a little bit about how we gather the ideas to inform that. So Dan has already introduced what ECDL Foundation is. I'll just say one other thing about the foundation. It is made up of members, and the members are the computer societies of Europe, including AICA, of course, and that's a very important and strong characteristic of who we are, and it enables us to draw on a very rich pool of talent and experience when we develop our certification programs. And another point I'd like to make is that Dan mentioned we're 20 years old. 20 years ago, our genesis was in a European Union funded project led by these computer societies. So we're really on a track of evolving and enhancing and developing over the past 2 decades. And again, this is another version of the image that Dan has shown. We've moved from that initial point in Europe as a simple Leonardo da Vinci project into being a substantive global organization that's delivering millions and millions of tests over the last few years. But specifically, I want to talk a little bit about our programs, and I suppose the certification programs we provide are at the heart of what we do. They really are our product. And I've mentioned the 20 years, and the 20 years has demonstrated how we've been able to bring and establish a program and allow it to generate value. And we now have a very strong brand, but we can't be backward looking. The sector we work in of technical certification is obviously very fast changing, so it's not all about just building on what we had and maintaining it and keeping it the same. If we do that, we won't succeed in the future. So it is very much about building for the future, and that has to be a key aspect of how we plan and develop our programs. So how do we direct that? How do we turn that from an aspiration into a strategy? Well, there's 3 pieces in our mission that help us to do that. Firstly, we know we're around proficient use of ICT. So it's about how people in practice use ICT in their daily lives and in their daily work, and how they do so proficiently and effectively. Our focus is obviously on individuals because we certify individuals. However, we also know that individuals work in organizations, and those organizations themselves have requirements. So it's not always just about the individual, it's about the organization. And at some level, it's about the economies and the societies that we work in. So when we're thinking about the requirements that we get in, yes, we need to talk to individuals, but we need to talk to organizations. And even at a policy level, we need to be aware of what the priorities are from governments or even from supranational entities like the European Union. So that's our focus in terms of identifying what we need to do. And obviously the end point has to be these quality-focused programs. The programs have to be driven by the values that Dan mentioned. Primarily the quality thing is crucial in certification, because if we don't have quality and integrity in our testing process, then we don't have any credibility. So, as I said, we've changed, and this shouldn't surprise anyone. We can't have just created something 20 years ago in this space and left it there and hoped that it would survive forever. That's not what happened. 20 years ago, in 1997, there was a conception that ECDL had to be a single product. It might have had a few different modules making it up, 7 of them, but it was a single thing. It was a unified view of competence. And that quickly changed. Even after a few years, it was clear that people wanted to progress in certain areas, wanted to develop additional skills, so we created advanced modules to meet that particular need. And over time, we would have identified new areas where people could become certified. So we've added to our portfolio. But we've done more than that. We've, I suppose, broken up the idea of there being a single set of things that everyone needs to know, and we've become a little bit more sophisticated about that. And when we introduced ICDL Profile and our modular flexibility a few years ago, it was a reflection of that, a reflection of the fact that different people have different needs, and even the same person has different needs over their lifetime, because we want to be in lifelong learning. It's different when you're a student than when you're starting in work and when you're later on in work. So our offering and our solution needs to be reflective of that. And we can't just stop there. We do need to look forward and think about, okay, where do we go next to make sure our programs stay relevant? And there are 2 things that have predominantly driven this change, the need to change. The first thing is technology, and that's very obvious. The world has changed a lot in terms of ICT, and so the goalposts are always moving. We need to respond to that. But the second thing is customer awareness, that increasingly we need to think about what is needed by the customer. And since technology has been embedded now for several decades, for example, in the place of work, people and organizations become more and more sophisticated about what they need in terms of the skills and the competences, either of me as an individual or as of my staff. So those are 2 things that really feed into the need to change. And here's just a quick picture to illustrate how the landscape in terms of tech has changed. You know, we see organizations like Apple, for instance, and how it's changed, how it's unified its operating systems across devices. Microsoft has done something very similar. Microsoft used to be around selling office productivity software. Now the mantra of Microsoft is first mobile, first cloud. It's all about mobile and cloud for Microsoft. They never talk about their office applications. Similarly, even in the Google space, Google Chrome started off as a browser, but now there are so many services being offered through Chrome. Is it nearly like an operating system? Android was a mobile phone operating system. Now it's becoming something else. It can run on other devices. So it's a very fluid landscape, and obviously our solutions need to be responsive to that. But actually, the technology is not the most important thing, and it's very easy to get caught up in tech. We're not actually a technology organization. We're a people organization. We're about competence and need. If we focus on the technology, we'll miss that. So what we're really concerned is, look, what do you need to do, or what do you need to do better, or what new things do you need to do? And then we figure out how to support that through the technology that they're using. So it has to be driven by users, and users are not all the same. And that needs to be acknowledged in how we develop our programs. So how do we do that? Because we've established a value around ECDL it's perceived as being high quality and it has certain characteristics. So how do we go around making different solutions that keeps that? Well, there's a Venn diagram here that attempts to explain what we're trying to do. At the core, we do have these set of standards that we want to preserve. They're really important to us. They're standards around competence. So we might have standard ways of ensuring that somebody can create a document or work with a device. But there are also standards around operations, how you might run a test center, or the quality assurance standards around that. And all those things are really, really important. So we need to keep and preserve that as a central point. But we do see increasingly a requirement to have sectoral considerations, to look to the main pillars of our activities and identify solutions that meet those needs. And it's been quite clear in our experience and those of our national operators that we have 2 main pillars of activity, one around education and one around workforce. And we've used those as being the two main sectoral focuses for our program development now. So in responding to or thinking about new products, we put our prism, our glasses on and say, okay, well, what is needed by workforce? Can we identify solutions that match to that? And then we look at education, which is a little bit different. What is needed by the education system? Now, I know in Italy education is very strong. It's the main centre of your business in terms of ICDL. So we need to preserve that, but you might ask yourself, well, how do we preserve that and create workforce solutions as well? So before I talk about how that perspective turns into actual programs, I'll just talk a little bit about the how we build our programs. So we have a nice inverted pyramid here, and the top level and the most important level are our 14 million candidates, and that's a very impressive cohort of people, a very impressive number of people. But the second layer for us from ECDL Foundation is absolutely crucial. These are the 20,000 test centres, and some of you in the room are in those 20,000. And these are the people who are at the coalface, the cutting edge of engagement with our candidates. And we need, when we're developing programs, to hear what's happening with candidates, with the clients and customers of test centres, because that's crucial for us in understanding requirements. What do people need in education? What do people need in workforce? So this is really important, and this filters down to our national operators, such as AICA, and then down to us. So when we're creating programs at the foundation, we're not just sitting down in a room and thinking about it, doing a bit of research, and then pushing a solution out into the world. We really want to distill all that information that we have through our network and create something that's needed by people. So we have some very sophisticated technology to help us in this. Here's an illustration of the tech we use. In fact, you might recognize the person there. I think she's in the room. Is Marina there? Yes, hi Marina. Marina is on one of our working groups, and one of our core development activities is to get together and thrash out in a very detailed way what goes into a syllabus, what are the competences that people need. So we have working group meetings like this, but we do actually do things in a slightly more sophisticated way than that. We have online databases to gather and collate information. And just to illustrate how we develop things like the digital marketing module, we do go through a process of collation and analysis of stakeholder feedback, and that stakeholder could be you if you're a test centre. It's certainly AICA. We get all that information together, and then we do a sort of a top-down analysis of thinking about an area. So in digital marketing, the question we asked ourselves, if we're creating a foundational certificate in digital marketing, what do we expect the competent person to be able to know or do in that area? And we then do all that work underneath to structure the syllabus, to bring together the learning objectives. And then we develop the test. And that work is informed by working groups that we have for each of our modules. It might be 10 members, including foundation people and representatives from our operators. But crucially, again, they're not doing it in isolation. Marina brings knowledge of the Italian ECDL network and of requirements in Italy to us and feeds it in. So this again is very important to us, and the ability to point to that network after we've developed a product gives us a big edge over a lot of other certification providers, because we can point to the computer societies, to the 20,000 test centres, and that's a really important thing for us to do when we're convincing people about how good we are as a certification. So just some practical information to keep you up to date with what's going on in terms of development. We maintain existing modules and we create new ones, and we're going through an important maintenance phase at the moment. I'm sure you're all familiar with our 4 crucial modules that we have around word processing, spreadsheets, presentations, and using databases. It's been several years since they were revised to Syllabus 5. They're going to move to Syllabus 6 in 2017. And this is particularly important for us because they constitute the largest block of certification testing of any ECDL modules. So around 500,000, in fact slightly more than 500,000 tests globally just in Q2 of this year. Okay, so March to June. So that shows you how important it is still for those topics, even ones that it's not so exciting to talk about word processing, but people still need to work with documents, so we still need to revise them and keep them relevant. And similarly, we'll be working on a new version of the advanced modules to match with the revised Syllabus 6 modules, and they'll be launched in 2017 as well. But in terms of new development, the new development we've engaged in has taken that approach I mentioned earlier about trying to look at sectors and understanding needs. So Dan explained the motivation behind digital marketing, and a lot of it was about the fact that organizations in particular, and certain organizations like SMEs specifically, have challenges in terms of getting on board with digital marketing, but also have a real need to do that. So digital marketing is not surprisingly a specific solution that we've created that's focused on ECDL workforce. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be used in education, but in terms of our strategic view in it, when we developed it, it's around workforce. Another thing we're working on, which you may be interested in, is in the area of computing. We're developing that at the moment, and we'll be piloting it in 2017. This is explicitly an education-focused solution, and really it's the first module we've created for education. It's aimed at 12 to 16-year-olds. It introduces them to issues around computational thinking and coding. And for us, it's a very important step because it does a few things. Firstly, I know in Italy, but everywhere in Europe and beyond, there's a huge focus on the need to get coding into schools, to get young people coding. And there's a perception that if we don't have people coding, then we won't be able to fill the IT jobs of tomorrow. And that's very true. But we need to be careful, of course, that we don't just teach kids to code. We also need to make sure that they can do boring things like work with documents and use spreadsheets. So it's very important for us that we can have a solution that answers all those needs, that does the things we do now, but also does some coding. So we want to respond to what we see as a policy priority in national countries and internationally, particularly from the European Union, to create a solution in this area. And we're doing that because we want to show to educational institutions that we're dynamic and flexible and that we can respond to the whole range of needs that they have, so that they don't look at ECDL as being the old thing, they're going to switch to coding. They look at ECDL as being the provider of the whole solution that they need. So I'll summarise. I talked about how 20 years ago something started and we managed to establish a very successful model of what we did, but we couldn't stand still. We need to keep changing if we're going to continue to be successful. And we've put in places processes to help us do that, to adapt to change and to respond to market needs. But we do need to know what people need. So that's a plea to all of you to continue pushing that information through AICA to us so we can understand what the priorities are in the market. So finally, I'd like to thank, firstly, President Mastronardi and my AICA colleagues for allowing me to speak. But I'd also like to thank all of you if you're currently involved in the programme for your efforts now and in the future, because the success of ECDL isn't really based on what we do at the Foundation. It's really based on what happens when people engage with candidates in test centres, and we really appreciate and respect the drive and commitment that's shown in Italy and throughout the world by those people who are doing the doing of ECDL. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's really us who need to thank you both for your presentation. It's very important to see how these certification programs are developed, keeping in mind the needs not only of a few European countries, as you showed the flags, but also what Daniel showed to us about the worldwide diffusion of the program. And this is really a value that we bring locally to our communities when proposing something which has a meaning all over the world.